Peace and blessings to the family. It is me, Coach 67 Sports TV. Shout out to the awesome and amazing LDBC, Lions Den Boxing community. Shout out to Envision Photography and Video. Shout out to Louisiana All-American Sports Network. Last night we did a radio broadcast for Bel Air at Broadmoor for Broadmoor's homecoming. And the same way Broadmoor ruined McKinley's homecoming, Bel Air did the same thing to them, Wow, I guess they got a taste of their own medicine. And shout out to the greatest university in the world, the Southern University, home of the mighty Jaguars. In this particular video, I'm going to touch on a variety of different topics. I'm going to touch on 3 different topics. First and foremost, I'm going to, touch on the Anton Daniels versus Kenyon Martin situation. Then I'm going to talk about the No Limit versus Cash Money versus battle later on today. And lastly, I'm going to talk about something one of my brothers, Brent Fox, pointed out in the chat, Fred McNair. So let me start from the top. Of course, recently, Gilbert Arenas and Kwame Brown, who really don't seem to like each other, they kind of always have this back and forth. But they was having this back and forth. And basically what ended up happening was eventually Anton Daniels got on. And Gilbert Arenas really revealed that he does not have full ownership of, his YouTube platform or whatever. Underdog brought like 50% of it, like they're 50-50 partners. And he has a huge contract. To me, it kind of sounds like he's an employee more than anything as opposed to having like full ownership. But nevertheless, him and Kwame Brown was going back and forth. And in the midst of this, Anton Daniels got on. And basically he was saying, like, Gilbert Arenas, because the main thing Kwame Brown was talking about is having ownership of your content, having ownership of your platform, so on and so forth. And I kind of feel the same way. Basically, Gilbert Arenas kept trying to, evade the point that Kwame Brown was making. He was being extremely elusive. He was dancing around that particular point. And basically, Anton Daniels was saying, basically you the brand and you the brain, behind your whole platform. And basically he was saying those other players, former NBA players, he didn't mean as people he met as content creators. They wouldn't be nothing without you, because he was like, a lot of NBA players have, YouTube channels and podcasts and all that, and it's trash. And he was like, basically, the rest of them would be nothing without you. Even though I don't think he met, from a personal standpoint, I think he met in terms of from a content creation perspective. And truthfully speaking, I vehemently disagree. When it comes to certain things, I rock with Anton Daniels. I used to be on his Patreon or whatever. At one point, I was going to be one of the bag chasers, but he only had like a certain amount of slots, and they already filled up, before I tried to get one. So, I rock with him when it comes to certain things. But when it comes to other issues, like, I strongly disagree with his points of view and his perspective when it comes to certain things. Like, for example, like the the Six of Goddess versus, Pearly Thing situation. I was definitely against him when it came to that particular topic. But nevertheless, Kenyon Martin, he had a little clap back. I mean, he really didn't really go at him hard. He kind of took the high road to a certain degree. And he was like, basically, like, so the rest of us, basically he was referring to himself, Kenyon Martin. He was referring to Swaggy P. He was referring to Brandon Jennings. He was referring to, everybody else on, Gil's Arena, which Underdog changed it to the Arena now. And it's no longer just Gil's Arena, which is, it kind of shows you how when you don't have ownership or something. But basically, he was saying, like, so the rest of us, we wouldn't be nothing without him. You acting like, we, his homies from the hood that just, will carry his bags or whatever. I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not, like, saying it word for word verbatim. But basically, he was saying, hey, you act like we wouldn't be nothing without him. And he was like, I've been somebody for a long time. Like, I don't know you. You are nobody. And I'm not going to lie. Like I said, I rock with Anton Daniels when it comes to a lot of things. I really strongly disagree with his perspective on this because when it comes to like being somebody for a long time, Kenyon Martin is right. Really, Kenyon Martin, he's been known probably longer than Gilbert Arenas. I mean, Kenyon Martin was a National Player of the Year, #1 pick of the NBA draft. And, Kenyon Martin, he's been that dude for a long time. And then, Swaggy P, Brandon Jennings, like the whole Josiah, the whole clique when it comes to Gil's Arena. Like, all of them are known in their own way. And in terms of like basketball podcasts, I'm not gonna lie, like Jeff T with the 520 podcast, him and his crew, like a lot of basketball podcasts, I really rock with them if they do good content. Even one point, Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, they had a good little thing going. So at the end of the day, I think it kind of depends on what type of guy you are. Anton Daniels, he's clearly intelligent, even though he likes to downplay his intelligence, talking about he was just a C student. I'm not really buying that. You can't become as rich and as successful as he became, without having some degree of intellect. So I strongly disagree with his perspective on that too. But at the end of the day, I kind of gotta agree with Kenyon Martin. Kenyon Martin, Swaggy P, Brandon Jennings. They all known in their own respective right. If they want to branch off from Gilbert Arenas and did their own thing from a podcast standpoint and use the same setup that they have with Underdog, I'm sure they would have a banging podcast minus Gilbert Arenas. So I disagree with him on that. The next thing, the Cash Money versus No Limit versus battle. People have been asking my point of view and my perspective when it comes to this. And truthfully speaking, I'm not even going to lie. Like, when I was like sophomore, junior, senior in high school, like No Limit, in our area was that. They were that record label. I mean, don't get me wrong. Bad Boy was doing their thing. Death Row was doing their thing. But locally in the state of Louisiana, No Limit was everything. And the crazy thing about it was, when I was playing football in high school at the time, like, I don't care where we went, especially when we was on the road, other teams would come to Mustang Stadium. Like, everybody wanted to be No Limit soldiers. Because I remember, we went and played this one team, and, it was a team, like, of majority white players. And the PA announcers like, yeah, here come the No Limit soldiers. I'm looking around like, what? Like, what are we doing? Everybody wanted to be like, Master P in terms of, like a brilliant businessman, an entrepreneur, black ownership. Everybody wanted to be like P. And then in addition to that, everybody wanted to be No Limit soldier. You know what I'm saying? So No Limit, they were huge. And at that time, Cash Money was emerging. This was before, Juvenile. This was when they had BG, Lil Wayne, UNLV, Magnolia Shorty, that version of Cash Money. And then, of course, eventually Baby revamped it, him and Slim, where they brought in Juvenile, they brought in Turk, Whoop the Whoop the Woo. And, of course, when I first went to Southern, that's when Juvenile and 400 Degrees really was emerging. And I'm not going to lie, Han was huge. Back the Thing Up was a mega hit, so on and so forth. So, like Master P said, more than anything in terms of a versus battle, it's a celebration of New Orleans, first and foremost. But secondly, I'm not even going to lie, just to keep it a buck, truthfully speaking, don't get me wrong, even when you look at that Juvenile, like Hot Boys wave of Cash Money, like they were huge. But the second phase, of course, you got, Young Money, Cash Money with Lil Wayne and Drake and Nicki Minaj. So, that brand of it. So if we just going on just to back in the gap, like No Limit versus Cash Money, on the No Limit side of things, rest in peace to Soulja Slim and rest in peace to Mr. Magic. And then, of course, C Murder and Mr. Cool are incarcerated as we speak. Even minus those guys, Master P, in my opinion, he was the biggest star on No Limit. So, you got Master P, you got Snoop Dogg, who really, he was a good addition to No Limit. He was a star, but we kind of always associated him with Death Row, you know what I'm saying? But minus them, you still had, Silk the Shocker, Mia X, Fiend, Mr. Want, Mr. Get It On Jones. You had, Cain and Abel. You had Hounds of Gert Town. You had Mr. Servo. And that's the thing about it. I think Cash Money has more star power. When you look at Lil Wayne, you look at Juvenile, the Young Money era when you got Drake and you got Nicki Minaj. But even if they just keep it to just, that phase of Cash Money when I was going to Southern and when I was on the yard, on the bluff, truthfully speaking, I'm not going to lie, they have more star power. But the thing people don't realize that if you wasn't like a diehard No Limit fan, no matter where you were in the country or in this area, like Master P was literally dropping a new album, a new CD on No Limit every month. And they had at least one hit on every CD. You know what I'm saying? I mean, don't get me wrong, from a production standpoint, when it came to Cash Money, Manny Fresh was their dude. But I'm not gonna lie, KLC and Beats by the Pound, like, they were cranking out a lot of hits, and not only that, but they were sampling a lot of songs. And that's why once they drop a CD once a month, there was always that one hit. You know what I'm saying? So, whether we talking about Candy Neighbor, like Time After Time, Silk the Shocker had a couple hits, Mia X, Fiend, Mac. So No Limit, in terms of like mega hits, like Back That Thing Up, and, some of like Lil Wayne Hughes songs, like they might not have hits on that level, but from a catalog perspective, if we talking about like track after track after track after track, I think when it comes to a volume perspective, I think in this versus battle, that's going to have to kind of be No Limit's motto in terms of like, hey, y'all might have bigger hits, but we had way more of them. Because like I said, they literally was dropping, a CD per month. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to lie, it's going to be interesting, to see how that whole situation plays out. But, salute to No Limit and Cash Money. They were huge, when I was in high school, especially when I, first got to Southern. No Limit still was doing anything, but it was kind of starting to taper off a little bit. And Cash Money really was emerging, and it just had got the deal from Universal. So at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see, what that situation looks like. And lastly, salute to my brother, Lieutenant Brent Fox. Y'all, please go to his channel, support his channel, especially if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers football fan, especially if you like boxing the way I do, go support his channel. And one thing he brought up in the comment section is like, hey, Jaguar Nation, y'all should give Fred McNair, like kind of like a fair chance. And at the end of the day, of course he pointed out that he's an outsider and that's his outside perspective. And truthfully speaking, I'm not gonna lie, Fred McNair was a very, good player at Alcorn. He was a very good head coach. They won two SWAC championships under him, even though they couldn't beat in the Celebration Bowl. They could not beat North Carolina A&T. Like, he did his thing. But, I think the issue from a Southern University perspective, in terms of Southern University fans, is we've seen this movie before when it comes to Southern University. You know what I'm saying? When essentially, if you look at the entire coaching staff, it's all like SWAC lifers when it comes to like assistant coaches and, the head coach, interim head coach now. So I think at the end of the day, I think they really need to kind of go outside the SWAC in terms of acquiring their next head coach. Then in addition to that, it would have been interesting to see what the team would have looked like had he been a head coach from the beginning. But with this current roster, Terrence Graves didn't really do a great job constructing it. And at the end of the day, truthfully speaking, I don't think he could do a whole lot with this current team and with this current roster. And I mean, if he could get more out of it than Terrence Graves did, cool. But even if he won out, I still think Southern needs to pivot and go in a different direction, because all of failure that this team had this season, he's attached to that. So at the end of the day, I think it'd probably be in his best interest if he got a fresh start somewhere else. But truthfully speaking, with this team, I don't think he's going to be able to get too much more out of it because, essentially it's not a good team. So at the end of the day, like, that's my perspective. But that's it for this video. If you find any value in this video, please like the video, share the video, comment in the comment section, subscribe to the channel. Also, click the notification bell so you can be alerted anytime I post any new videos, any live streams, any shorts. And lastly, I'm less than 100 subscribers away from that magical 1,000 subscriber mark. So if you're not done so already, please subscribe to the channel and also click, like and share, click the notification bell, so we can get to where we're trying to go in. And not only that, but so I can invest more resources in terms of investing in the channel. But that's it for this video. Be certain to catch me for my quick post-game reaction later on this evening, and for my full post-game live stream tonight, probably maybe about midnight, maybe a little bit before that. We'll see if it'll be the Let's Go After show or the Midnight Hour of Power, one of them two, in terms of full post-game live stream. But I'll catch y'all on the rebound. Peace and blessings to the family. Salute to everybody, and go Jags. You dig?